What's going on, boys? This is going to be day 4 or 5, I believe. Let me go look real quick. This is going to be day 4 of diving deeper. This is just going to be a quick little trade review on what I traded today and how my day went, how I managed to get away with the day being, not the best, but not the worst, and that's totally fine with me because at the end of the day, guys, not every single day is going to be good. And whenever you have a new week with a lot of data into the end of the week, you have to take things a little bit slow at first and then start building out your week whenever you start finding opportunity. And sometimes you can't find opportunity on a Sunday, you find it more on a Monday, right? So I do expect Tuesday through Thursday to be a better spot for me for my weekly profit. But let's just talk about today. Um, So today is just really about um, a lot of charts that are really setting up for moves later in the week or for next week or for whenever they decide to expand. And that's obviously not the chip sector. I'm really not ever going to be interested in Nvidia other than whenever I see a noticeably weaker tape and a stronger sell in that tape, then cool, that'll be fine. But for the time being, guys, it's more and less just looking at other sectors, other names within other sectors, things like that. So my first focus was Valero. So Valero it's an energy company, and energy has been. Go over to the sector fund and XLE. XLE is kind of in this spot where, okay, we're kind of getting a retest of this massive, massive, massive resistance that's been built for how many days on end. If you look at this all-time high resistance, look, it's been a resistance that's been established ever since all the way back here in June of 2022. Now, whenever you look at that over here and into where we are testing now, this is a 722-day resistance. That's a very big resistance given the fact that this did see some rotation into the early end of the year, and then now we're kind of basing and flagging out. We do have some unfilled gaps within the charts down here, so I am very aware of this. But whenever you're looking at the current sequence, the current trend, the current daily perspective, we have low, low, and then a potential another low. So I didn't think that this candle right here was going to result in a new low from this low. I thought it might look like, okay, let's take swing low, swing high here, maybe look at some sort of sell. And then once we identify and find that sell into like equilibrium or something, or the golden pocket, maybe I could take my stab from there. So yeah, that's that. That's kind of just pulling it from here to here. And then what I really didn't even notice was any strong notable buyer off the golden pocket, which first of all is kind of just against my rules. What I was more and less looking at was like this previous support, which turned and tried to turn into a resistance, and we got a really strong tape into the close of last week, and then we got a sell immediately off the open. I thought this sell was going to bring some sort of balance off of these levels. Just in the energy sector itself, I was more and less looking for something that looked like boom, 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 boom. Something like that, or at least just a recovery in the slightest back into like these imbalance candles up here, or potentially like the pre-market low spot. Well, there wasn't really any established pre-market low, but yeah, that's kind of what I was looking at for Valero and in Confluence or Valero. And Valero started to give off this really strong 15-minute base. It looked strong for the time being, but it wasn't anything like super, super, super crazy. And then one thing that I did want to note was that this had a really nice move on Friday. And where was this move coming off of? This move is coming directly off of like this little gap fill down here. So when you're looking at this, this is a massive retest of like this spot right here. That's more of a daily slash weekly resistance here. And then you have your gap fill right down here. So my plan was for today, okay, I'm going to be looking at Valero, potentially the same general concept, swing low, swing high. I would be looking at like a higher low off of like 0.50 to the 0.618. Unfortunately, it was not all happening off of that spot, and the sector as a whole got one more leg down. I was in some weeklies over here, and my plan was for a 154 higher low. I obviously caught a $1.50 move on that, and then a dollar move again. So I was up a dollar on this trade, from the underlying on my weeklies, which was like 30%, 30 something percent. And I was thinking to myself at the time, I'm sized properly to the point where, okay, if this position were to go red, it's not really going to affect me. And any sort of like half to three-quarter to full size position that I would win on the next following trade is going to totally eliminate any 20, 30, 35% loss on this one, because I'm intending to look for a reversal trade in the first place. So whenever I find this and I see a potential higher low coming, if I were to catch something like this, that would be probably a 70 or 80% win, putting at me at like a 3 or 4 hour minimum. And then if it has a strong close, I can then swing that weekly contract. If we saw some early week energy rotation, which I wasn't expecting, I didn't take a lot of serious size behind this position, and I was clear about that. But yeah, that's kind of just how that did not work. And we did have, like I said, this unfilled gap here previously. And then here was like the little bull gap. So whenever you look at this and you look at like the 15, these are kind of the levels that I had. My risk level was like this spot over here. And then once I went into the 5 and I started seeing the base, the base, the base, and then I started to see this candle, that's whenever I started to cut my position on the retest. It was barely a loss because my previous ads were 154 and beneath 154, 154 like 25, then into 154, then into 153.75, then into like 153.70, all on the bid, primarily on the bid, nothing really on the ask since the spreads were a little bit more widened on this one, so it wasn't really anything too serious. And then I did add some exposure for a red to green move based off of like kind of beneath this spot right over here. Um, and then I started to see that buyer kind of reappearing, and then there wasn't really any strong notable sell that couldn't push this any way lower. So I am going to keep my eye on this one, but that was kind of just a trade that I lost on over here, and then I re-added over here. I got a nice quick lucky pop into the close. I sold it, and then I have some bi-weeklies. The bi-weeklies is lighter exposure, but that's why I'm playing a little bit aggressive with some bi-weeklies, and we're going to see what this thing can do for tomorrow or midweek. This is an inside bar on much lower volume than the buy candle itself. This is also a lower low from a 3 lower low series here. Well, I could say two, of a real present buyer really entering into the name, and we never saw any super notably strong sell over here. What this more or less was doing, I think, was just kind of gravitating towards that gap fill, towards this retest. So we're going to see what happens over here for tomorrow and for the remainder of the week, given the fact that this level right over here, this daily level, is a retest, and we did get the gap fill from down here. I would be looking for buy side structure to develop off of this spot. So anything that looks like this or better, meaning pop, sell, low a day established right off of the daily level, and then I'd be looking for something like boom, boom, boom. If we could catch something like that, that'd be nice. If we can't, then obviously we'll wait the chart out and see what it has for us in the future. So that's kind of just what I was seeing with Valero. Not any crazy full size or any meaningful size. Now I did catch an Apple short for like 60% over here. So let's go to the Apple short. We'll talk about this one. This was a really nice short, just given the fact that we never saw any true consolidation off the open. What we more or less saw was a gap up and a move off the gap up, right? So it was kind of a gap up, a retest of the previous resistance, and then a move. Now, whenever we started to float higher and develop a trend, we never saw any crazy sell side absorption, meaning any strong seller coming in to make an attempt to push this down. It was more or less just a sell, a very aggressive higher low, really no consolidation, and then a move higher. This all had equal high wicks to it. So anytime I talk about equal high wicks, keep in mind, guys, whenever we're looking at the hourly, I always like to talk about where we're looking at in terms of like where we're at from like the larger perspective of things. First of all, let's go to the daily and just talk about really where we're at, because that's very important, guys. Extremely important. We're just in a massive wide range area of like potential supply. right? So when you're looking at this from like just grabbing a bigger zone, this is a $4 zone. If you want to minimize the zone, you can into like up here, which would be go into your hourly now, take a look over here, and that's kind of just where we were selling from to create new lows down into this, right? So this was all the tops of where that micro distribution was happening in that short that we caught from a very long time ago. This is also a major bearish progress spot, and it's being built with lower highs off of it. And then we're trying to break structure and now put in higher lows and then a higher low trend, which I do understand, but this is more and less just looking at trend exhaustion and then a failure, and then the notable seller does kick in, and then we get a wick, and then we get a failure, and then we get then yet again another push, another failure, and kind of what was happening here was this was just seller, and then a buyer stalled here, or a seller absorbed that buyer, and then from there they push this down, they push it back up with a weaker buyer now, given the fact that the consolidation here isn't big. This isn't a true strong retest of this inside bar breakout. And we actually never really got a retest of this swing high over here. Right, so I was more or less just looking for the 193 retest and go. That's exactly what we got down here. I covered most of my position, and then you got a secondary opportunity to cover most of your position. And when I was looking at this live, guys, I shorted this right over here, this little retest for their lower high, which was like this little wick here, and then I noticed this wick followed by this inside bar, and then I saw the failure candle after, and I grabbed puts on the failure candle and kind of like on this candle as well, and then what my risk was, what my tolerance for the trade was looking like was, okay, fills are kind of off this level up here. What I'm basically looking for is like a stop above like either high a day or like this wick, which was bringing the lower high. So it would have been like some sort of risk that looks like this, and then obviously a retest down to here at the 193 spot. That's about a 5 hour trade, and I got 60% out of it. I probably would have stopped out realistically for like a 20, like I would say like an 18 to 22% loss. So we're looking at it like a 3 hour trade minimum. Obviously this could have went a little bit more, but always getting out on those retests on an early week trade on a Monday is going to be very, very important for your growth, for your mental capital, for you to protect your, for you to establish something to start off the week, which is also very important, which is a lot of people sleep on. Establishing some leeway for yourself early to the week is very, very important. Um, so that's kind of what I was looking at with Apple. Whenever I noticed the tape over here, it was more and less just a buyer that was incrementally being wiped out of the order book, kind of just being filled and making no true progress on price. And it was kind of just a stall here where everything got relatively dry, and we started to see a seller kind of momentarily take over with no bid really stepping in off of like this support right here for like a higher low. Figured we would have to move down a little bit, find the buyer off of like I said, the 193 psych, or even what my target was, but it was a little bit of a stretch, was low a day. We never got low a day, and we actually got a really nice like 30-minute base right over here. Um, that kind of showed that you should be taking some profit there. So that's kind of what I got there. And then I had a Amazon long for 25%. So we go over to Amazon. Amazon has been in some sort of accumulation kind of all day, and it's been on a dip, and it's in a discounted entry on the daily chart, which is something that I always take into consideration, right? And where is this coming off of? It's coming off the 176 psych, the golden pocket. What is this also coming off of? Well, we got to think here, guys. What do we have here on the hourly chart? Take your extended off. Take a look at the hourly. What do we have? We have a gap fill, right? So when you look at the gap fill from over here, get rid of your fibs. Oops, that's not the fibs. This is the fibs. Okay, so we have this gap fill. The gap fill pretty much primarily, like mostly fills And then from there, that's whenever we start getting that buyer. I also think there was a lot of, I think there was some sort of trap over here in the close. It was a little bit delayed and it was a little bit lagging behind the market, but it sat here and it based with a low and then a low that swiped that low and then ever so slightly some sort of higher low and just a three touch points here of a support and then the move into the close. This was a very notable sell hitting an Amazon with some definitely some decent volume behind it. But then we start getting that wick off the lows with like a 1.07 million volume candle and then a low volume base in between the ever since that, right? So whenever you're looking at where this is from like the larger perspective of things, it's taking out this wick, it's filling pretty much most of the gap, and then it's accumulating beneath that, and then it gets to close above 175. Now, Amazon wasn't a primary focus of mine, so it was a little bit weird of a trade, I'm not gonna lie. But whenever we're looking at this, this is the overnight gap, something that I typically like to mark. It's not going to be a clean execution level per se, but let's just take what are the rules? Previous low to the current high. What do we have here? Well, I guess you could take this low, but it doesn't really matter. Let's just talk about the fibs, the levels, everything like that. We have a current low a day established over here, and then what is happening here is, can anybody pause the video and tell me what did I see here that inclined me to look long in a close on Amazon? Can anybody tell me? Could go into extended. Okay, well, if you can't tell me, there's two things. I'm going to mark them out and then maybe you could pause it and tell me why. This spot and this spot, right? And the reasoning why I had these two spots is because, okay, we got some sort of effort off the open. The effort stalled, which I do understand because the effort is stalling into a range of previous bearish trend towards the opening range of that. So I totally understand that this could definitely experience some failure for the time being. But then we get this trend where there's not a lot of volume behind it, and then you just start finding the exhaustion where there's really little to no volume. It's kind of shaky volume. It pushes back up. It rejects off of like this opening print spot, and then from there, we never really established any sort of progression from a sell side perspective, and this is all just kind of basing and basing and basing within equilibrium of this move to this move, right? And keep in mind, always got to look at the daily chart perspective, look at the gaps, everything like that. We filled the gap, we put a wick behind it. It kind of moved with the market into the close, and then we got a gap up, we got a sell, we got a relief, and then kind of rejected the opening print spot, and then we sold off again. But where were we selling off into? Just the established low a day, and then what do you start finding? An effort from sellers over here. So they try to put in a lower high, right? They try to put in a lower high off of like a discounted spot. Um, if you want to take like your gone box or just look at like the opening range low, they try to do that, but this is all just pushing basically into like equilibrium of this area, right? So whenever you're looking at from here to here, it's kind of pushing into equilibrium. It wipes the low and then it finds a buyer off of it and finds the relief. Really no notable volume, but there wasn't a volume increase. There was kind of like an increased volume trend. And then what's happening here is I'm simply just looking for where's my little thing? A break a structure, take out a previous lower high. That lower high being aggressive, that's your last seller attempt. Whenever that seller sees that, it's going to base it, base it, base it, and then it's going to push for this high now and eventually into the orb. That's exactly what happens here, and that's what I was looking for. Luckily, I held this pretty much into the close. I only got like a 26.7% win at highs, but it is what it is. I'll take it. And that's what secured the green day for me. So that's that. That's all I was really looking at. If you want to look at like the 15, it looks a little bit more clear from the 15, or like the hourly looks, in my opinion, the best. And then if you want to go from a level by level perspective here, you could look at it like this. This kind of looks like the unfilled area. And then this was like pretty much where the progression was kind of leading from, because it was defended here. It got a quick little slip beneath it to fill some of the gap. It didn't fill the entirety of the gap, it filled it over here. So this was an attempt and it found a buyer within the midst of that spot. So I also had like, I was looking at this. And whenever I find the low a day off of a higher low protecting this spot, as well as into the discounted range, and then I see kind of like the, keep in mind this candle right here is also filling a lot of the imbalance from up here, right? So if you take a look at the opening print from over there or like this area, it pushed into that, it sold, it took supply off that spot, and then it put in a lower high and then a secondary lower high with a more aggressive attempt. It established a new low a day that was bought. So whenever I find the breaker structure, I'm looking for the breaker structure. I'm looking for the ads off the breaker structure. I said, oh my gosh, we got a candle close above. I caught the little wicks here on the bid, and then I never really went red, maybe ever so slightly. And I was just waiting for this to flag out above the 177 spot. Risk was like below this, so I'd give it like pretty much that. About 32 cents of risk targeting this high. It's about a 3R trade. So I was probably risking 10% to make like nearly 30, right? So it's not necessarily super bad. It could have been like a 2R trade, but I was quite confident in what this was doing. 2R isn't the worst thing in the world. It's not the best, it's not the worst, but yeah, that's kind of what I was seeing. There wasn't really anything else on the watch list. Nike was an absolute dog shit like trade today, trade attempt. It was just really slow, not really doing much more than less just digesting this wider, larger move. Ford has been one that's been on the focus. It's been how many days of a support that was finally broken beneath, and then we found that established buyer for potentially a quick little trap and move higher. That is a big notable weekly print. There isn't the craziest volume behind it, but I think if this thing does hold 12 bucks, which is the current weekly low, or yesterday or today's low, I think this thing will move, and I would be potentially looking for a trade up into the $13 area, maybe the 12.50 plus. I could get those 12.5 calls in the money. We will see with those. Could always buy some time with Ford because it's half the time a turtle. So yeah, we'll see. There isn't any crazy tech chart that I really like for tomorrow. I will be watching Tesla, so I'm very interested to see what Tesla does in this range of support. I would love to see something where, oh my gosh, okay, we're breaking beneath the support, short it, retest, and then it kind of ever so slightly claims, closes above with like a hourly candle closure, and then it starts building out the structure for new highs. If it doesn't do that and it starts to fail, I would be looking likely for like, you could always look at your 618 swing low, swing high. You could say, okay, this one's going to go into the low 60s near the earnings candle opening print and this previous support. I could always look for this little zone over here, which would be the secondary spot that I'd be watching. Um, yeah, so we already did test equilibrium. I think it would move a little bit lower if we got to there, but I guess we will have to see. But that is a zone of focus for me. But the first scenario is something that's going to be a top focus of mine. So we'll see with Tesla. It's not going to be anything that's like coming super soon, in my opinion. And hopefully it doesn't move overnight off anything crazy. But yeah, it's all just kind of a patience game here, guys. I did talk about the Google short, how I realized a lot of the profit down here. I am slightly, I believe I'm slightly red on this now. Or no, I'm a little bit green over here, but it's not anything crazy. What I'm more and less looking for is probably, I'll look for a day trade on this like tomorrow. I want this support to keep failing, like on the hourly, which is like 173, 174. This is a retest of like that earnings candle territory, earnings candle high. And this is also kind of like some sort of lower high look from like the hourly. So I will have to see what this does bring for tomorrow. but I still hold some monthlies over here. I'm fluctuating, but I already realized some down here, so it's pretty much a risk-free position for me now, and I'm more or less just looking for this one to go a little bit bigger and get as much profit that I can out of it. There's really no other chart that's super clean to me. I'm really interested to see what Apple does for the future though. I really want to see if this one is going to start failing and putting in some sort of like lower high look on the weekly, or if it's going to just keep building out this, break base and go for the new all-time highs or for this swing high. So I'll be watching Apple at a couple spots on the chart, but it's not going to be anything too crazy until we get into like midweek is basically what I'm looking for. So we'll see.